Hi everyone, welcome to a sort of unboxing video. We're going to take our first look at Warhammer Fantasy Battle 3rd edition. This is my copy right here. I got it a couple of years ago and it's still in a rather good shape, seeing as how old this is. This book is almost 40 years old already. You can see there is some damage over here, the little corner has come loose. And there's also some damage, I don't know if you can see very well, over here at the top. The corners and some of the pages have come loose. I don't know if it is in this book or in Warhammer Armies, but either way, it is not a pristine book, but it is still in rather good condition. This book is going to be our first look at this book. We already had a preview in White Dwarf 95, the one that we had on the last podcast episode. This video is going to be on my Patreon and is going to be free for all. I'm also going to do the Warhammer Armies books at some point. I don't know if they were released simultaneously or not. For now we're going to focus on Warhammer Fantasy Battles, and I might also do a more deep dive type video or episode, probably some podcast episodes, where we take a look at the differences and similarities between 1st, 2nd and 3rd edition. And I think there's going to be a series that I'm going to put up on the Patreon. So let me know if that's something that you're interested in. So here we have Warhammer Fantasy Battle by Priestley, Halliwell and Ansell. Rick Priestley, Richard Halliwell and Brian Ansell, of course. We open this mighty tome to a more or less blank page, showing us nothing but the Warhammer Fantasy Battle artwork, and I put my name stamp in it, which I do with all my books. And then we get to a title page. I have to hold it like this, showing some lightning, and again the logo and the authors. And then finally we get to the table of contents. Now, the interesting thing about this book is that it is divided into sections, and each section has its own table of contents. So, for example, here we have Warhammer Fantasy Battles, and then it says contents. And then we go to the basic game, and it has another page of contents. So this makes for easy referencing, easy looking up. There is, however, no index at the end, as we will see. So that wasn't the thing for, I believe, up to and including 7th edition. Maybe 7th edition had an index, but 6th edition definitely didn't. Maybe a glossary with some terms, but nothing like where you could find which rule explained. So here are the different sections. The introduction, the basic game. So the introduction, we'll see, is about collecting and painting miniatures and making your tables. Then the basic game rules, giving us the turn sequence and a bit of psychology. Then the advanced rules for all the different types of units and extra things you can get, chariots, war machines, stuff like that. Then we have a magic section with lots of spells. Then in between all those rules is a bit of background, the Warhammer world, giving us background rules and background, not rules, but information about the world and how it came to be. And then we get the beastiary, which is a more or less complete list with all the things you can get for Warhammer armies, except that you don't yet get them as armies, saying if you want to play this army you can have so many of this troop type, etc. And then finally we get a sample scenario, and that includes also some cutouts, I guess. So some things that you can cut out, as well as some reference sheets. Quite a hefty tome and quite a lovely one, I must say, because there's a lot of drawings and artwork in here, both in black and white and in color. This lightning bit comes back quite a lot. So here's this little table of content that I already mentioned. And then we start off with a bit of an introduction as to what is fantasy wargaming. For some reason, black and white picture of some night goblins. And then we go to a lot of the pictures here showing you Fantasy Battles, the blister packs where you can get your miniatures. There's a whole section on buying models. Then we get to the preparation. How do you make your models? So plastic models, preparation for plastic models, preparation for metal models. And then to the painting section. Which colors do you use? How do you prime? Here's part of the preparation as well. Cut them out, file them down, remove the mold lines. All those things that you are probably familiar with already. Improving your painting technique. So start off with the basics over here, and then you can go to improving, which is things like blacklining and shading. Here we have an example on how to paint this orc, which colors are used, and of course these are the Citadel colors. And some beautiful pictures of some painted sample armies. Some freehand banners over there. I think these might be done by John Blanche, although I am not quite sure. But I know that he did some banners like that. And then we get a little bit more on painting here. Shading chart. So here we have all the colors that are available. With your basic color and then the dark shade and the highlight. So your 3-step program. So if you want to paint, for example, bright red, you use red gore as your base color. You shade with Imperial Purple and Blood Red mixed together and then thin down to a shade. And then you highlight with red gore and Sunburst Yellow or white in the mix. Some more pictures of some beautifully painted armies and some lovely terrain pieces. And then we get to the gaming setup, making your table. And there's some lovely things in there as well. More pictures of individual miniatures of the fortress. And here are some things on how to construct your table. If you want to have a dedicated table, use 2 of these trestles, or maybe use one of them and have a sort of shelf that you can mount on the wall, or maybe something that you can with a hinge make it stand up and fall down again. So there's lots of ideas here on how to make a hobby table if you don't have a dedicated room for a hobby table, for a gaming table. More pictures interspersed with some lovely artwork, and all the art that we have here is well, I was looking for a word that I can't really translate into English right now off the top of my head, but all of this art is accompanied by a little 2-letter initial. In this case it's I am, and I'd have to look it up because there's a list over here in the beginning with the illustrations, and I am, where is it? It doesn't seem to be on in alphabetical order. Well, there should be an I am over here. I'm reading this upside down because I don't know how to do the camera properly. But for some reason... Oh, there we go, Ian Miller. I should have known that, I guess. So if you see, I am is by Ian Miller, and there's JB for John Blanche, and TA for Tony Eklund, and so forth. Pardon the little delay there. So yeah, making your table and making terrain pieces as well. A wood, hedges, walls, a hill. All those things you need. Some things about making houses, and these are the cardboard houses that you get with the terrain packs in 2nd edition. So please go back into the stores and buy those as well. That was 32 pages. This is page number 32. And now, so far, we've only covered the introduction part. Now we get to chapter 2, the basic game. And the basic game, again with a table of contents, and it tells you how to play the game of Warhammer 3rd edition. There's a games master that you need. In contrary to later editions of the game, 4th edition onwards, you don't need a games master. In 3rd edition, you still need a games master who is overseeing everything and making up rules. And if you want to do something that's not covered by the rules, just ask him and he will tell you whether or not you can. So yeah, here's how you play, what you need, dice and equipment. Defining the troops, that's very important. Make sure that you know what the stats are. All the stats that we have here that you also know from later editions, up to and including leadership. And then get intelligence, cool, and willpower, which you will be familiar with if you came into this game from 2nd edition or 1st edition or Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. But those 3, intelligence, cool, and willpower, are not used anymore in 4th edition onward. You get your basic human profile here, and then you get the turn sequence. And the turn sequence is reminiscent of what we saw in 1st and 2nd edition, and is a little bit different from what we see in later editions, because here we have 2 movement phases. You get your movement phase, followed by shooting and hand-to-hand combat, and then after that there's reserve, then magic, and finally rallying. They switch this around a little bit throughout the editions. And if we do a deep dive comparing all those things, then I will definitely spend more time on that. So starting with the movement phase, here we have the move value of different creatures in the book. They just printed it here so that you have a bit of an idea which creatures have which move values, just to get a bit of a feel for the numbers. Then we get immediately into encumbrance, and that means that you also get into armor. Basically, for every pip of armor save you have, you move 1/2 inch slower than you normally would. So if you have no armor, then let's see what to say here. Animal, the rider and the animal. If the rider and the animal both have no armor, then you get a saving throw of 6 and you have no reduction. If your animal has cloth or metal, then you get a 1/2 inch reduction, but you do improve your armor save. So that's cloth or metal is what you call in later editions barding. Same for shield only, light armor, these are the same of course. Light armor plus shield, heavy armor only, and heavy armor plus shield. They all wrote it out, but you could have just said you get 1/2 inch less movement for each pip of armor save you gain. So if you have a 2+ saving throw, you move 2 inches less for that. So your heavy armored knights don't go as fast as they do in later editions, where encumbrance is not such a big thing. We get the effects of terrain over here. Difficult ground, very difficult ground, linear obstacles. And there's nothing here yet about maneuvers, I believe. There might be might be a little bit later, but it's probably there's a lot about maneuvers in the advanced rules. Here's how you make your units, how you set them up neatly in ranks. There's a record sheet that you can use to keep track of your units. Lots of examples on how to form your units and how not to form them. What happens when you have units partially in woods, partially in difficult terrain? How does it work when you have units crossing a linear obstacle? When you have units in single file or single rank, what can you do with them? There's some really interesting combinations here, especially when you go in a single file. As long as one corner of your movement base, one corner of your base touches the base of another miniature, then you can still be in a cohesive unit. And that means that you can do things like making this circle that's more reminiscent of what you'd have in Wild West films when the pioneers or the settlers get attacked by Indians. Here we do have a little bit about maneuvers, some simple maneuvers, and there's also some more complex maneuvers, but those are mostly covered, I believe, in the later rules and the more advanced rules. The rules for wheeling, the rules for turning, How do you measure the wheel with a bent tape measure that you have here. Here's what you get about moving in a single line, and that's what with all this little snaking pattern that was still mentioned in later editions as well. Let's see, then we get to the shooting phase, which covers the ranges of your weapons, and this gives you also a comparison for the range in yards and how it compares to the range in tabletop inches. So your short bow can shoot 160 yards, and it is equivalent of 16 tabletop inches. So here are all your weapons and their ranges. You get your ballistic skill and to hit. This table has remained mostly unchanged. I believe they only changed it for the old world, but other than that, it's still your ballistic skill plus the score that you need equals 7. Or 7 minus your ballistic skill is the score that you need to roll. So if you have a ballistic skill of 5, you only need to roll 7 minus 5 equals 2. A bit about your facing, models on foot and models on horseback. They can see all around. Models in chariots can do that as well. Shooting up to a hill, shooting down from a hill. Shooting at troops that are partially in a forest or completely in a forest. What are your ranges then, depending on where you are within the forest? That determines your visibility. And then we have the to hit roll and the modifiers. The tables that we get for your strength versus toughness. The saving throw determined by your armor. Modifiers to the saving throw. This is all very basic stuff if you are familiar with any edition of Warhammer Fantasy, at least with the later editions. But also some things like this are in the earlier editions. Then you have some casualties. How do you remove them? And then you get, let's see, the hand-to-hand combat phase over here. You get your units into combat. You have to charge, of course, to do that. And then there are some situations here. What happens when you have different configurations of units at different angles? How do you charge those? Then we have, let's see, more about charging over here. Still more about charging. And then we get to the combat itself, striking a blow. Here it shows you, this is quite interesting, if you have a big monster that has different attacks, for example stomp and bite and claw, and depending on which attack that you use, that depends on which way you can use it. So for example the tail, you can use to the back and to the both sides, but not to the front, and a gore attack can only be used to the front, stomp can go all around, etc. Let's see, then we get the result of the combat, not the result, but how to resolve it. So your steps within the combat phase. The weapon skill, again the strength and toughness table, they always print that twice and they do that in every edition as far as I know. Saving throw again. Removing casualties. What happens when you have multiple combats. And then the combat results, and in this edition you have different results depending on what happens. It's something that they more or less use in the old world as well, Warhammer the Old World, and that is that you have a sort of ebb and flow of combat. You get a pushback if you win combat, but if you don't, rout the enemy. Then we get the rout, rallying and reforming, and that's what happens after combat, of course. Let's see, here we get the flee and pursue section. And then we get a little bit about the reserve moves, and then the routing, which is not mentioned here for some reason, but it is a different section, but I guess it was covered in the combat itself. How to rally, the rallying phase. Next up, something that we also always get in these books after the turn sequence. The first section is psychology. Psychology, which things that you have that affect the troops on the battlefield. Fear, terror, I think terror is here, I don't know if terror is here. Frenzy, hatred, stupidity, panic. Then we get a little bit about your leaders and the standards and the musician. So that's your command group section. These are included in the basic rules. Standard bearers, capturing standards, recapturing standards, musicians. A little bit about how that works in mounted units. And those are the basic rules. From here on we can go on to the advanced rules. And the advanced rules come with their own table of contents again, and these seem to be getting bigger, or that might just be my idea of it. So your advanced rules, they begin with the points values. How do you calculate which units you want to face if you want to have a more or less equal battle? They give you the points values for the intelligent races, and then they tell you what you need to do to these races and to these points values in order to equip them. So, for example, if you have a human, let's go all the way back over here, a human which is 5 points, and you want to give him a pike that costs 1 point, then your human now is 6 points. If you also want to give your human some armor, if you want to give him a shield, then he is now 7 points instead of 6. The cost for riding animals, the basic cost, depends. This is what we saw in 2nd edition as well, by the way. Excuse me. So what your basic cost is depends on which factor you have to multiply the cost for the riding animal with. Let's see what else have we got here. Oh, here are the different weapons. So what happens when you have more differently armed units within the unit, differently armed models within the unit. Because back in 3rd edition you got different models with different types of arms and armor, and you could just buy them in blister packs and you'd get them at random, and then you just have to make sure that whatever is mostly represented in the unit, or what the average is, that is what your saving throw is going to be and what your weapons are going to be. Here we get the rules for the weapons, for the hand weapons first, then for the weapons used by the mounted troops, then the missile weapons, and then here the gunpowder weapons. I skim over the artwork, by the way, but please also take a look at that, because there's lots of pretty pictures in here as well. Next up we get character models, and your character models in this game work in a bit of an interesting way. It was already mentioned in the introduction, because your characters are purchasable as levels and in increments of 5 at that. So your first character is, let's say your champion is a level 5 character, or maybe a level 10 character. Level 15 character, this is your hero level. And level 20, 25, those are the Lord level characters. And a level, depending on which level character you have to roll a die. And depending on the score of your die, you get a number of increases. And level 5 characters get 5 increases compared to the basic profile. Level 10 characters get 10 increases, 15, 20, and this one gets 25 increases. So yeah, there's some examples over here on how to do that, how to construct your characters. And there's also then the points modifiers for your characters as well. If you have a level 15 character, your points for your equipment go times 3. Let's see, also for the different mounts, those are more expensive if you have a better character. And then we get some about how those character models work, character models in action with missile fire and how they are in units. Then we have a little bit about the general. The special troop types are next. And these special troop types are things you mostly see in army books in later editions. So here's a little bit about animal handlers and assassins. Those are not available to every army, although maybe in 3rd edition they were. But in later editions, certainly they weren't. Elite troops, those are level 1 to 4. That's what they also said in that introduction article. And there's also the levies, which have stats reduced, but also their points cost reduced then. Goblin fanatics got a whole section over here in the book. Shape changers, sappers. This provides lots of opportunities for very fun narrative games, I think. Skirmishers, scouts, and then a little bit about your battle standard, the army standards. Also, something that has been reintroduced in Warhammer the Old World in one of the supplements is that if you have an army of a certain points value, you also need some baggage, and that baggage gets deployed. There's a baggage area that you can attack, the baggage trains that everybody has been constructing since that. Which one was it? Was it the Match Play Guides? I don't remember exactly, but there was one of those books. After they released all the Arcane Journals, there were a series of campaign books and other supplements, and one of those included the rules for baggage trains and how to work them. Attacking the baggage area. Then there's something about beasts of war. And here we come to a lovely photo that I do have to point out. We have a dwarf war machine, the Goblobber, and we have some lovely undead war machines, the Chariot and the Skullchucker that we already saw in that box. And then for some reason there is, in the midst of all this kerfuffle, a dwarf simply roasting a pig and having the time of his life, completely doing his own thing. Despite those skeletons walking about and trying to attack his peeps from behind, I guess. I don't know exactly what's going on here. It's just a lovely photo, but this dwarf here, I don't know if he's part of the Goblobber crew or not, but he certainly seems a bit out of place. So yeah, this is still about animal handlers. Also, flying beasts are here. Let's see, are they a little bit later? No, they are later. Excuse me. They will be. We will get to them in a minute. First, we get to the engines of war, and here we have the different types of them: the bolt throwers, the stone throwers, the cannons. Lovely game here, by the way, that is being played. I love photos like this. It says staff at the design studio enjoying a Warhammer battle. I don't recognize the people in this picture because I wasn't really into who was working behind the scenes back when I was younger, and the people now are obviously a lot older. So if you know who these guys are, then please let me know in the comments. I'd love to know. Anyway, it seems that some of them are indeed enjoying the battle, but this guy is scratching his head and might be more than just an itch. I don't know how the battle is going over here, but it seems that he thinks something is not going right. So you get your scatter thingy for the skull chucker. No, what's it called? The catapult. For some reason I automatically went to Skullchucker there. Rules for cannons, and then for other things like organ guns. Some diagrams over here showing you how cannons fire and what they can hit. Some more lovely artwork and more pictures. And different types of cannon as well. You got your organ gun, your flame cannon, fire throwers, rocket launcher, bazookas. Those are portable weapons. Fire thrower was used by the Skaven. Oh no, there's a different one. There's a war fire thrower, but it should work very similarly. And for some reason, there is, amidst all these war machines, some elf beast handlers. Lovely miniatures as well, by the way. They got re-released for a little while as a made to order a while ago. Next up are the chariots, how chariots move, how they turn. And here you have to use 2 tape measures for some reason to measure the distance that you can wheel, I guess. We'll get to it when we get to the rules exactly, how that works. Apparently for your chariot you can do a sort of special move over there, special mounting, dismounting rules. So here's a character going off of the chariot into the unit, another one coming off and getting into the chariot, and then the chariot continues. There's some, does remind me of some of those action movies where they jump into and out of running cars. I assume the chariot pulls up and waits a bit. Here we finally get to the rules for flyers, and you see flyers here, they don't just fly, but you have different levels: ground level, attack level, and then levels +10, +20, +30 and +40. And depending on which level you are, that also depends on how high your buildings are and what you can target with your flyers. Aerial shooting here, combat against ground targets. How do flyers work? I think this is something that also changes from edition to edition. In 2nd edition and maybe also 1st edition, you had different types of flyers and also different height levels, and how many height levels you could ascend or descend in each turn. That's also something that depended on the type of flyer and the type of flight move that he had. So it certainly got a lot easier in later editions. Next we get a section on special formations, things you can do when you have also mixed units with archers and spearmen. A box unit. Here's a unit that is for some reason sort of turning itself into a fortress, at least what it resembles. You get the arrowhead formation, or the wedge as it's called over here. Some lovely John Blanche artwork, by the way. And then we get the advanced rules for combat. This is what happens when your units are not aligned properly. Then you can, in the push and pull phase, you have to twist them a bit before you move them apart. What happens when you guys are getting surrounded? What happens when you charge 2 units at once? Here you have something very interesting happening. You charge a unit, and instead of halting, your other guys continue, and as long as they touch, they can continue to the second target. And then you draw a line between the 2 points, and then you align the units like that. All rather complicated, I think, but it does make for a more realistic approach. Let's see, here we have for some reason a bit of a smudge on my page. I think it just didn't print well. I don't think the previous owner has done something to it, but it is still readable, fortunately. Here we get the section on buildings. How high are the buildings? And about fighting in buildings, shooting from buildings. Some more lovely artwork, including our big friend the White Dwarf over there, the Dwarf Lords of Legend. That lovely skeleton horde box, skeleton legion, what was it called? The box art for the big box with lots of plastic skeletons in it. Let's see, shooting at buildings. And then we get scenery for competition games, because these rules are also for competition games. How do you set up your table then? You also roll a D100, and depending on what you roll, that tells you what to set up in the sections of your table. How do you make rivers? How do you have them enter and exit the board? Some more things about that. Deployment. How do you deploy your troops? And some different examples of that. And then determining winners and losers with the victory points here at the end. Then we get to the magic section. chapter number 4. And magic is basically just a lot of spells. It starts with how do you determine your wizard level, your magic level, and how many points they cost, how many spells they can have, how to cast spells, how you select your spells. And there are 5 types of spell in this book. And they all returned as well for the Warhammer the Old World. So there's quite a lot of things more from 3rd edition that Warhammer the Old World copied than I had originally envisioned. A section on wizards and armor that's also included. If you have armor, then you can't cast spells, probably unless you are a Chaos Champion. And then we get the spell index, the spell list, starting with battle magic spells. And then we go on to demonic spells, or demonology as it's called in the Old World, elemental or elementalism, illusion, and necromantic spells. And then the Old World also includes the lore of Wa for the orcs and goblins, as well as high magic, and I believe also dark magic, although I'm not sure about the last one. I think dark magic is the last one. And then here we get all our spells, so it's just page after page of spells and lovely drawings. You got something to sell, you just know that. Here we have Gandalf and the Balrog, which might actually be Gandalf and the Balrog, supposed to be. I don't know if this is supposed to be a scene from the Fellowship of the Ring or not, but it is certainly very reminiscent of that. With a guy with a horn that can be seen as Boromir, another guy over there that could be Aragorn, or I don't think it's Legolas. Gandalf versus the Balrog. Lovely that they included it there. All of these art pieces, by the way, deserve to be looked at for a lot longer than I am taking the time to leaf through. But I love how they did this, how they put, here you get a page with only 2 spells, parts of 2 spells, and for the rest it's just pictures upon pictures of a photo of some skeletons and some drawings to just, it's also the Golden Demon painting his miniatures the way that you get on those boxes of paints that you could get in the day. But this artwork is just here to draw you in, to help you discover which stories you want to tell with this game. So Chaos Cultist over there. Here we go again. 1 column, not even a full column of text, and the rest is just plain artwork. Kemler and Michael Jackson. Some friends that we know from earlier games and earlier things that we've discussed on the podcast. Beautiful pictures here. And we're only at the elemental spells. Oh, I love this one as well, that castle. Who did that? Ian Miller again. Scarlock's Wood Elf Archers. Discuss that in a different episode of What's on the Box here on the Patreon page. This is also a fun one. It's called the Tower of Screaming Death. I have no idea what the story behind this is, but I guess this guy shouldn't usually be that big, and this is more like a concept art for what's going on here. I don't even know if this is a spell or something, or a scenario. Something that, definitely draws you in, and having a Tower of Screaming Death in your game is something that you could do a lot with. You could tell a lot of stories with that. Never seen a mushroom forest like this before. It is painted on the backdrop, but they also have some mushrooms over here. So it really blended in nicely over here. the miniatures and the artwork in the background. Looks like it's supposed to be like it's a diorama of some sort. But those mushrooms don't seem too difficult to make. Never seen them in games of Warhammer of later editions. Only the smaller ones used by night goblins to do their things. We keep on going with the spells, and then finally we get... I glossed over this a little bit. After the spells, we get to the section with the magic items. We get our different types of magic items, some magical weapons, missile weapons. We get some scrolls and rings, magic armor. I'm sure there's going to be a ring that makes you invisible, because I don't think there's any game that doesn't have that back in the 80s when it was still clearly ripping off Lord of the Rings. Speaking of which, mithril armor, we even have magic standards and some other items here. Dispel magic, magical musical instruments. That's got more of a role-playing aspect than a battle game aspect, I think, but yeah, you can use them over here. Then we get to the section on the Warhammer world. Why a Warhammer world? Yeah, that's a good question. But yeah, if you make a game like this, then the world starts to develop. So then we get to the what happened here, the global geography. A lovely map, 2 maps actually, of the Warhammer world in general, and then a little section, the old world, that you see over here, where you have a little bit more information on the realms of Bretonnia and the Empire, and Estalia, Tilly, the Border Princes, the Badlands, all those interesting things that you couldn't quite fit in this little section over here. And the rest of this is, well, mostly to be filled in. I don't think there's any armies for Cathay yet. Cathay didn't get an army until the Old World. So there's very large parts of the map that are not covered. And interestingly enough, they also show here the southern Chaos Waste. Most of the Warhammer maps I've seen from later eras don't include the South Polar region, only the North Polar region. So here we have some background on the different areas of the world. And then we get the timeline, the Elder Age, the Age of Man. Here we have the years, the Elf Reckoning, the Dwarf Reckoning, the Imperial Calendar, and the years before present. And it's very convenient that every year 1 for anything other than Elf starts on an exact number of years, rounded down to the nearest 1000 for the other races. So Dwarf year 1 is 3000 in Elf years, and Human year 1 is 6000 in Elf years and 3000 in Dwarf years. And 2500 years before the present. So in those days since Warhammer first started, I think this is the first time we get a timeline like that, showing us where the present is. It's 2500 in 3rd edition, and it slowly progresses upwards to the editions. And I believe that 2525 or something was when the end times, well, I wanted to say happen, but let's just say when the end times didn't happen. Some notes on the calendar over here, and then we get the old world into a little bit more detail. Then we get to the beastiary, where we have again a table of contents of all the different creatures that you can get, starting with the not starting with the races, but starting with some rules, some attributes and stuff that you can get. Some special rules first: animosity, saga animosity, and instability. Then we go to the chaos attributes. This little D100 table will get replaced by some D1000 tables in later editions. Interestingly, they have some dominant and personal distinctions here. Dominant means that if you have a unit, then this is the dominant chaos attribute in the unit. And personal means that if you just have a hero level character or just any character, then he has some attributes that are counted as personal. Here are your explanations for those. Then we get to the beastiary itself, where we have the different races, the intelligent races, the giant races, the creatures, chaos creatures, undead creatures, ethereal creatures, demons and elementals. And then it starts over here with giving you stats and points for all the intelligent races. So if you wanted to build an army from this, you could. You have everything you need in this book and you don't need Warhammer armies to do that. Going over this in a bit of a faster pace, you have your elves, sea elves are still included here in this edition. Gnomes are included, just pointing out some of the things that are disappearing in later editions. Chaos goblins are for some reason over here and not as part of the section of chaos. Hobgoblins are still a race. Are there also still half-orcs that were in 2nd edition. Human chaotics over here, lots of things about humans. Chaos cultists, chaos warriors. The infamous pygmies are mentioned over here. Then we get to the section on Skaven and the Slan that were still a race over here, but in later editions became the big lizardman leaders. Snotlings mentioned as a separate race, Zotes that have disappeared since. Then we get to the giant races, which includes giants, but also some smaller things like minotaurs, treemen, ogres, trolls, troglodytes. I didn't know this, but from the looks of it, these are just big lizardmen, and those would later be known as Kroxigor. Let's see what have we here, some trolls. Then we get to the creatures, both the mundane and the magical, such as bears and boars. And then you also get to cold ones, things you can ride, dragons, dire wolves. The giant eagles, we see here, lovely drawing of a dragon. Giant rats, giant toads, giant snails, giant, well, vermin. Horses, mammoths, or mammoths, as Mr. Kentucky the dwarf called it. You get your warhounds, chimera, chaos steeds, all those beasties that we know from later editions as well. Jabberwock. And all of these you could buy as miniatures as far as I know. Then we get to the undead creatures, the ghouls, the liches, the mummies, skeletons of course, undead horses, undead riders. And to the ethereal creatures, the ghosts and things like that, wraiths, specters. Wights are ethereal over here in this edition. And then finally the demons, I believe that was the last one. Your lesser demons and your demonic servants. Greater demons should also be in there. Maybe I skipped over them. Oh no, that was not the last one. Elementals was the last one. So here you get your elementals. Air elemental, earth, fire and water. Your 4 classic elements. And then we get to the end of the book where we have foreign Ron's, I'm trying to read this upside down, I can't even read anymore. Foreign Ron's Last Stand, a battle between elves and goblins. It gives you a bit of an information about the scenario over here, how to set up the table. There's a deployment area for the orcs, which is all the way around the board. There's a deployment area for the elves, which is just in the middle. And then that's it. Go fight your battle. But where are the armies? I'm glad you asked. They are in the handout section, which we have here at the very end of the book. starts with the Elven command sheet. I have to be careful with this because these pages do tend to come loose easily, with the different types of units that your elves get, mostly archers and horsemen. Then the orc command sheet, which is a little bit more varied with lots of different rank and file orcs and goblins, some wolf riders, some fanatics. And then here we have the cutout section. You get your orc infantry, so you don't even need the miniatures for those. You have here a face record track, so you can just cut out this little symbol and put it on the different parts of the face if you want to keep track of where you are. Here we have the elf cavalry that you need for playing the game, the goblin cavalry, the elf infantry, height level markers for your flying beasties, some more goblin infantry, and your 2 fanatics over there. Those numbers that you see here, the clock face, that is which direction they go in. I believe you have to roll a d20, and on a 1 to 12 you go that way, and I think on a 13 to 20 you either stand still or you choose. Depends on the rules. I believe for the stone throwers then it means it lands dead center, but for the fanatics I don't exactly know how that works yet. Here we have our quick reference sheet for the turn sequence, hand-to-hand combat, procedure. For some reason they don't include the turn sequence on this side. Something about tables. Oh, turn sequence is all the way down there. So for some reason they put it down there. Psychology, flying creatures, so a summary of the rules, a record sheet where you can record your units, and then finally some ads, Warhammer Fantasy Regiments. That's that box set that includes several sprues with 1 dwarf and 1 elf and 1 goblin and 1 orc and etc. on them. Let's see, Warhammer Register, that's also been mentioned a couple of times in White Dwarf. That's if you want to find someone to play, just put your name on the Warhammer Register and then others can contact you. Here are some of the source books that you can get for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, as well as Warhammer Fantasy Battle and 40k. So these are the scenarios, Blood on the Streets, those are the campaign packs, Macbeth, Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader, and here's some things for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. We have which one is this? Warhammer City, I don't recognize that. Death on the Reich, of course. Enemy Within. This one's a bit difficult to read for me. Shadows over Bogenhafen. So those are very famous campaign books that you got. And then we end with a lot of templates. The Stone Thrower template, again with the clock face on it, for a small Stone Thrower template. We have a Bombard over here. We have let's see, what's that? Animated water. I couldn't read that word upside down. I used to be very good at reading upside down. Must be getting older or later. Mystic Mist. Fun name there. Look, see my book is falling a little bit apart over here, but still in rather good condition. Dust Storm, another Mortar Blast, Skaven Poison Wind, Flame Cannon, Blast over here, Cloud of Smoke, Quicksand, and these are double-sided, by the way. I didn't notice that yet. But if you cut them out, then you have one. You can flip them over for different things. So yeah, not a Stone Thrower, they put in 2 of those, I guess. Bazooka, Fire Thrower down there, and then we end up with another page with those swirlies that I don't think is supposed to mean anything, but I don't know exactly if this is one of those magic things where you close your eyes or cross your eyes and see something. Haven't tried that yet. Things just for decoration. And then finally the back of the book telling us what is inside the book. But that's what we already saw. I'm going to carefully try to flip this open like this so that you can see the full picture. We also saw this in a white dwarf earlier. That was about the introduction article. But here we see the full picture of the warrior in the middle being blasted by a fireball. And then we have the standard bear coming in at the back, recklessly charging at some goblins who are for some reason breaking their spears on, I think, absolutely nothing, or maybe this rock. We have an archer over here. We have a dwarf who is not looking happy, but that's very common for dwarves. We got a ball and chain over here, which implies a fanatic is attached. And there's another one over here in the background that definitely has a fanatic attached. So yeah, lots of things going on in this picture and also in the other pictures. Like I said, I'm not going to do Warhammer armies now. That's going to be a separate video. If you liked this video, please let me know. If you have any experience playing 3rd edition, also let me know, because I'd love to get your thoughts on this. I myself have not yet played 3rd edition. I would like to play it at some point. I also still have to play 2nd edition, haven't tried that yet, and we've gone through it. Having a young family means that you don't have a lot of time for gaming, especially with new rule sets that you don't have any opponents for. But I am slowly working on getting some things done, and I hope at some point to be able to play some of these scenarios. Would be cool to see how these go, and that introduction scenario that you get there at the back of the book is also one that is definitely going to be on my list. I hope you enjoyed this video, this little unboxing in air quotations. Like I said, if you have any comments, then I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. For now, I'm going to say thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again on the main podcast.